Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Solomon David from the British University in Dubai. Thanks for this invitation to deliver the keynote. I'm honored and delighted to do so. This keynote is based on one of my recent research, which focuses on the epistemic access for effective learning, which is relatively cross-cutting the main conference theme today. Access to education for all is still a dream. We have, although, addressed the access issues relatively. Millions of young people around the world still do not have access to education. We have also not realized that we often fail to support all to successfully complete. We need, therefore, to understand the difference between access and epistemic access. Access to educational opportunities, or other ways, access to campus and program is still not guaranteeing access to the true knowledge. Epistemic access means completing the learning process meaningfully by achieving the defined learning objectives effectively. Bowen points out that there is too much emphasis on access and not enough on finishing. Let's therefore explore how epistemic access helps students to achieve the learning objectives and complete the given learning task. Ranzier, in his book, The Ignorant Schoolmaster, claimed that all people were equally intelligent, which means intellectual emancipation is possible for anyone, and a need for the formal education and a master is not always required, as learners could learn themselves or could be taught by anyone, formally or informally. Although he contends that not all intelligence are equal, not all intelligence are equal, and not all are born equal, but all are born unique for him. This makes intellectual emancipation difficult for some, given their circumstances. The emancipation of an individual is therefore interrupted by the structure and agency, as argued by Sen in his capability approach. Equality is not an end, but a point of departure for Ranzier. Equality for him is neither given or taken, but practiced. Hertbeerster, however, cautions not to be fooled by the claims in The Ignorant Schoolmaster and indicates the need for diligent facilitation of the master for effective learning, particularly in specialized domains. Let's now explore what is epistemic access that we are talking about. Morrow proposes a systematic learning to ensure epistemic access, outlining the following solutions to enable epistemic access. He recommends to remove the constraint of poor disciplinary knowledge and lack of structure and differentiation in curriculum, to remove the constraint of inappropriate level and scope of teaching and inadequate feedback and reflection, to remove the constraint of empiricist views of knowledge and the lack of materials. One has to therefore understand that epistemological access against formal access depends not only on teaching, but also on the efforts of the learners. Students who get access to campus and courses are usually entitled to have access to right knowledge, but not yet guaranteed of gaining the right knowledge unless striving for it. William interprets epistemic access by gaining access to information, guidance, funding, and financial support, and support on admission, gaining credit for existing skills and knowledge, attaining relevant knowledge and curricula, accessing all infrastructure, accessing a variety of courses and modes of study, and experiencing differing learning processes, a supportive environment, a variety of certification, accreditation mechanisms, and access to a range of vocational and occupational outcomes. It is debated that epistemic access is grounded in epistemic values that shape and guide inquiry to truth, discover the truth. It is also argued that epistemic access is not a product that could be sold or bought, nor transmitted automatically just because a student has paid the fees, but it must be achieved through rigorous academic activities by the students themselves, with the support of the teachers, of course. Epistemic pathways are framed in a logical flow as following. The first step in the pathways of epistemic access is access to physical campus or the virtual learning platforms, which otherwise is the access to educational opportunities and learning resources. Opportunity to study, particularly at tertiary level, is a privilege only some achieve through academic merit, zeal, and through socioeconomic dynamics. It is important to acknowledge that the access to sufficient and quality learning resources is not the same for all those who have access to education. There are institutions that are highly equipped. There are institutions that are under-resourced. And that's the given reality in today's context. The second step in the pathways of epistemic access is to access the knowledge. It is argued that not everyone who gets access to educational campuses and learning platforms gain the required true knowledge. They must strive to access the tested knowledge with necessary facilitation from the masters and must be able to test their given and gained new knowledge. The third step is the pathway. The third step in the pathways of epistemic access is the universal pursuit of true, authentic knowledge. The universal pursuit of true knowledge is achieved by pursuing tested, justified, adequate, and authentic true knowledge, as contested by Gettier, for whom knowledge is justified true belief. The theoretical underpinning of epistemic access is driven from the following theories and models. Johann Müller insists that epistemic access is grounded in epistemic values that shape and guide inquiry to discover the truth. Richard Feldman argues that gaining authentic, adequate, tested, and justified knowledge is important to hold the epistemic obligation. And Robert Oddie insists that that we have epistemic duty to fulfill, that our epistemic duty is knowing what is right and avoiding what is not right. These are the two epistemic duty that we need to hold. Brewer recommends that cognitive science and reality are so complex, and therefore it is important to remain with epistemic openness beyond perception, reason, and empirical evidences. They are often, not all the time, sufficient to content and conclude true knowledge. Sturgeon demands right epistemic attitude from learners and teachers, which is ensured by intellectual humility and cooperative intellectual behavior. Fricker suggests establishing epistemic justice by intellectual actualization for the betterment of the society and the world. And Goodwin and Spearman propose epistemic solidarity by providing intellectual support to peer, doing intellectual teamwork in which groups can support the alternatives truly in their interest. Meaningful pedagogy and meaningful pedagogic process is rather important to ensure epistemic access in order to impart and gain authentic and adequate knowledge. Cooley considers that meaningful classroom interactions and encounters are essential to gain epistemic access. Self-regulated learning and personal commitment to learning also support epistemic access. Gettler suggests that self-intimacy with knowledge offer epistemic privilege to one. Self-intimacy refers to the conscious state of cognitive mind. Cross and Attende observed how disadvantaged students negotiate and ascertain their epistemic access by productive use of their opportunities, resulting in the completion of their academic goals. Of course, Pierre Bourdieu recommended long ago universal pedagogy over arousing pedagogy in order to support all students, as students from all social backgrounds would understand universal pedagogy better compared to the arousing pedagogy, which does not privilege the working class, according to Bourdieu. It is crucial to have access and opportunity to tested knowledge in order to gain access to epistemic access. One has to understand the distinction between the common sense knowledge versus scientific and authentic knowledge in order to better comprehend what is epistemic access. The Goethe problem, or the tripatriate theory, which holds that knowledge is true, knowledge is justified through belief, that if you believe something with justification, and if it is true and tested, then you know it. Otherwise, you do not. Therefore, tested, validated knowledge is authentic for epistemic access. For Morrow, epistemic access is not a product that could be sold or bought, not transmitted automatically just because a student has paid the fees, but it must be achieved through rigorous academic activities. It is important to create space for research, enhanced teaching and learning practices. Thereby, epistemic access could allow one to access tested knowledge and be able to test his or her knowledge in order to prove his or her gaining of the epistemic access to the right and true authentic knowledge. We should acknowledge that different types of learning lead to acquiring of different types of knowledge. Not all knowledge could be learned in the same way. There must be specialized approaches for different subjects. Cooley informs that some learning activities leads to access to knowledge, which some while some leads to competence and other skills. So certain knowledge is supporting to develop cognitive abilities, certain knowledge supports to develop skills and competences. That distinction has to be understood. Mahlangu indicates that students and staff come from different backgrounds to universities, and therefore same approach to access to university is not appropriate. For instance, internationalized curriculum, pedagogic practices are recommended to comply with staff and students' diversity. Therefore, universities must have multiple pedagogical approaches to support epistemic access. It is observed that external factors do pose demands for educational institutions to enhance epistemic access to compete and survive in the emerging educational market. It is evident that the local and global economic trend often have significant impact on what to be taught and researched at universities. We are aware that universities across the world are heavily being influenced by the ranking regime, and many universities have embraced the ranking trend to facilitate their process, which has both positive and adverse implications for epistemic access. Well, here are some of my closing thoughts and reflections on epistemic access to enhance learning. It is important to facilitate epistemic access for all. And we must balance both equity and quality while we address epistemic access, and thereby we can facilitate epistemic access to all. For a long time, we did not believe in balancing equity and quality, but in recent times, many exemplary best practices have proven the possibilities of balancing the two. That quality does not have to suffer while we address equity, and equity does not have to be left behind while we focus on quality. In order to facilitate epistemic access, we must provide access and opportunity to authentic and adequate and tested knowledge by fulfilling our epistemic obligations. Completing the learning process meaningfully by achieving the defined learning objectives successfully is essential for students to ensure epistemic access. As intellectual emancipation is possible for all, and as anyone can learn anything at any time, however, there is still the strong need for a diligent facilitation of the master for effective learning, particularly in specialized domains. It is therefore recommended to use meaningful and multiple pedagogical approaches, considering the diversity of students and staff. We must not forget that there is one important rule in the epistemic pathway, that we must not block the path of inquiry. Well, this brings my keynote to an end. Thanks for this wonderful opportunity, and all the best with the rest of the conference. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that are in line with my arguments and reflection in the keynote. Good day, and thank you so much.